All right. Rob Glass, thanks for joining me for this episode of Culture Eats Everything podcast. It's great to see you, sir.
Thanks. It's great to be here, Tom. I appreciate you having me on.
I remember the first time I met you, I didn't really meet you. I saw you on stage, actually, at the Superintendent's Conference up in Michigan, and you were receiving the Michigan State Association Superintendent of the Year Award. And I remember thinking very clearly, here's a guy that's got a lot of confidence, that's very good at what he does. And in this case, obviously leading schools and leading a school district. And so I'd love to start there and just hear your thoughts on, this word confidence and what it means to you and when you think about your leadership journey.
Sure. I think about confidence often because I'm usually aware of when I have it, really the confidence rolling versus maybe I don't at other times. And you see it all the time I think in individuals, athletes, teams. I certainly can sense when it's kind of rolling for me and when it's not. And I think that it is amazing what a difference maker it is, and how our responses, or at least I'll speak for myself, my responses to external stimuli can, make a difference as to that, whether I can maintain that confidence through adversity or whether I let it sort of, get a hold over me and diminish that confidence. So I think it's a huge factor.
You're a busy man.
My phone
is blowing up.
Yeah.
This is when the listeners know that this is not a studio produced podcast. We're just two guys having a real conversation.
Exactly.
In the middle of a busy life where you're trying to run a school district now, not in Michigan, but New York. But we'll come back to that in a second. You said a few seconds ago, when it's rolling and when it's not. I'm curious, what does that mean?
Well, I think confidence is something that people sense. You obviously, from the example you gave when you first saw me, you sensed confidence. I think it's pretty hard maybe not to have confidence when you're getting an award, for something that, maybe it's easier for the confidence to shine through, and you kind of know that it's there. But there are other moments where maybe, you're aware that, I'm kind of not sure about this. Is this something I should be, doing? Is this the right move? Or, for some leaders, and I'll speak for myself particularly, you're wondering, it's not about knowing technically the right thing to do, but are you applying the right, do you have the confidence to use a combination of what you know and your intuition to move into a situation in a confident direction? Body language, tone, ability to look outside yourself and see others. When the confidence is flowing, I think those things are more abundant. You're kind of looking out at others because you're not really worried about yourself as much. So I found that those are my best leadership moments. And what I try to tell myself at those is, just try to envision the time when you're your best, the best version of yourself, and put that forward, and try not to be a member of the, not to be your own worst enemy when you're not sure exactly how things are going, because there are enough external forces of adversity that will come against a leader at times, but doesn't mean that I have to necessarily give in and join them and be one of those doubters at the moment. I still need to stay more objective and sort through it and try to maintain that confidence. So I think it's big, and I think our mental mindset goes a long way toward determining whether we have it or whether we don't.
Yeah, it reminds me of that whole idea of Csikszentmihalyi's idea of flow, when you're in that flow state and you're just doing what you do really well. And I love that you said, when I'm focused on other people, when I'm, as a leader, when I'm focused on other people, that's when I tend to do my best work. And why is that, you think?
Well, I think it kind of, it's a good question. I think probably it helps speak to the fact that you're not really questioning your direction. You're not really questioning looking at yourself and second guessing yourself, or having that hesitancy, kind of like maybe a ball player. They say you play fast when you're not thinking, you're just going, right? So your objective as say a defensive back or something is, you're following your training, it's kind of automatic, and you're looking for the objective, right? So a lot of times working with people, your objective is to get them to do their best work. Your objective is to get the team oriented in the right direction, to try to inspire them and motivate them. So when you're doing that, it sort of takes for granted that you're not really looking at yourself and overthinking it. You're not really, too worried about how you're doing it or whether you're doing it something well enough. You're just doing it. And you're doing it with some conviction and with some a sense of mission. And I think that shows. It's amazing. What's amazing to me is people can tell, and they will tell me, and I appreciate the feedback, when they can sense confidence in me and when they can't. Good coaches, folks like yourself, will sort of give those indications to me that, and that tells me that it's real. It's something that's tangible. It's something that can be seen by other people. And learning, having a self-awareness and learning about that is a big piece of it, because people do see. There's an old adage, more is caught than taught. I think there's something to that. People, they catch a vibe, they catch a wavelength somehow from you that you might call confidence, or the lack thereof.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it lives below the surface. That this is not like a degree you go out and get, right, in confidence. Right. That it's part of who you're being as a leader. And you mentioned the role of intuition briefly, and trusting your own intuition. How has intuition played a role in your leadership?
Well, I think, over the years, as I've tried to understand my tendencies or styles, I think I've come to realize I'm fairly intuitive, and so I try to own that. Just realize that there's something to that. I may not always understand it. I'm the kind of person who also likes to understand the whys and the wherefores, and how things work and operate within the principles. But it's a little bit like a musician. I tinker around on the drums a little bit, right? So when I'm trying to learn the fundamentals of something, I'm certainly playing very differently than when I'm in the moment, right? When I'm just letting it kind of flow. They're really two different purposes. So learning, I think that intuition is when you have an awareness that you need to sit there in that pocket, in the moment, and exercise, enjoy that confidence and put it to use and let it work for you, rather than not, rather than questioning it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big deal.
Yeah.
So if you've noticed going into interviews and things, right? Going into certain situations, it's palpable when it's there. But I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it is. It's palpable. It's a great way to put it. You can feel it. You can sense it. It's like, I said, for when I saw you accept that award, you could sense it, even though I didn't know you. I didn't even know your name at the time. You were probably 100 feet away from me up on a stage. And yet that sort of quiet confidence came across in the nonverbals. And we've all heard the techniques that are out there, the tips and tricks of, standing up straight and breathing in deep and projecting your voice and giving eye contact and all that, right? Which is good. But it doesn't really get to the heart of it. And so for young leaders out there who are aspiring to be a leader someday, or maybe a superintendent like you, what advice would you give them to help nurture that confidence?
I think try to get to know yourself and your tendencies, to know, to have as much self-awareness as you can. And sometimes you do that by taking assessments, and sometimes you do that by getting close to people who give you honest feedback. Also just by trying to notice, how different, reflecting on times when things seem to flow well and when they maybe didn't, and see if confidence is a part of that. And and then how do you nurture that? How do you feed your soul, feed yourself the right internal messaging so that you can kind of stay in that spot? Because I do think our own internal messaging plays a big, and what we choose to do with it seems to play a big factor in it. So, and I think there's also some other techniques that I'm just beginning to learn about, and some mindfulness techniques and things like that. That I think, getting enough. It sounds really basic, but I find the more sleep I get, the better care I take of myself. The more I'm in tune with, healthy relationships around me, all those things that we know, self-care kind of things we should do. They do seem to make a difference in being able to, for me, in finding that confident place and not wavering into, a place where that confidence is dwindling or challenged too much. So it's a good place to live, and I don't know that I've ever found anybody, nor have I been able to fully just live in that spot all the time. I want to find a way to live in that spot more consistently, and it's amazing how it can even swing day to day, situation to situation. And I think it's just awareness and putting yourself in a good fundamental spot to capitalize on what you might have as a resource, inside.
Yeah, and you're mentioning all the foundational building blocks, right? The things that were true 50 years ago are probably going to be true 50 years from now,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The getting good sleep, eating healthy, exercise, taking care of ourselves, the quiet time, meditation, prayer, whatever that happens to be for you. All
Yeah.
the self-care things are so important.
Yeah. And then reading some good books, there's some really good books out there that really talk about some of the things. One of the things I've learned, I think, through, I think through you, Tom, and through some others is, the importance of, that it's not unusual to have maybe questioning thoughts come along, or negative thoughts. I think that there's a Dr. Daniel Amen. You see him on PBS a lot, and he'll talk about these automatic negative thoughts, ants, he calls them. And that's how I remember. Like for someone to say, it's normal to have these thoughts of doubt, maybe to creep in, and to read that in books, and to understand that, and say, oh, it's not just me. It's like it's something that we all face and struggle with, but we don't have to be under it. We can find strategies to live in a more optimal place. It helps me keep going to try to find that place, more consistently.
Mm-hmm. I'm laughing because I just literally hit the submit button this morning on something I've been thinking about doing for probably close to 10 years. It's a reflection that the University of Notre Dame puts out. And I thought that it was something that other alumni did, not me. So
Yeah.
I put it off for years that way with my negative self-talk. And then my whole reflection was actually on that very thing, that all this negative self-talk that we give ourselves. I feel like I'm a pretty confident guy. I've done a lot of things. I was a CEO, a superintendent at age 34, and yet it still creeps into my thinking. And to be able to acknowledge it, to be able to acknowledge that ant, that automatic negative thought, I like that, and then dismiss it or put it to the side, to use it as information versus use it as fact, is
Right.
part of the mastery of the leadership journey.
Well, someone had said in recently, and leader's job is to create reality, and I think it's true. And so how much more is that true for ourselves? It just takes, it takes some attention to realize, okay, so I can control my responses, and I need to make sure I'm not assuming an out of proportion reality here. Make sure that I'm trying to focus on a preferred future in front of me, and those are just techniques I think you pick up over time, and you need help with sometimes, for people to help you learn how to do that, whether it's through books or associations, or folks like you who help people, find their purpose and stay and live within it. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
And just that awareness is big.
Yeah, or finding your people that you can. I'm thinking of the Interchange, our CEO forum that you're a part of, and the opportunity for CEOs, superintendents, presidents, leaders to come together, and to just to be real with each other, to be willing to say, here's what
Yeah,
I'm wrestling with, and get some input, get some coaching from others.
yeah, that's so important. You find it sounds cliche, but when you're leading an organization, it is a little lonely, right? And it's a real opportunity when you can come together with other people who are facing the same things and get that coaching. It's been really, really beneficial to me, and I've enjoyed that experience. Any opportunity I've been able to get it, um, because for it's a rare opportunity to share, to commiserate, to help someone else go through things that you faced also, and especially when it's just so rare that you get a chance to do that.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
it becomes a kind of a precious thing to be able to do.
Yeah, and that helping there gets back to that first point you made, right? That when you're focused on others, when you're helping others, it allows you to be your best self, and to be the inspirational leader that you need to be for your team.
Hmm.
So I'd love to hear about that, Rob. What's the future you're excited about now in your new role, as a superintendent in the New York City area?
Yeah, it's a great question. I appreciate you asking. I'm really excited about the school district that I'm part of right now because it has so much going for it, and it's got such a rich tradition, and students here achieve so highly, and the families here are so supportive. So you have all of these amazing components, and yet I feel like there's systemic opportunities here, things that we can put in place to actually leverage what's here, and put it in organize it in such a way that it functions a little bit better for the outcomes that we want for our students. So one of the things is we haven't had a strategic plan here for several years. And while we have a really nice set of graduation goals and a mission statement that is a very good one, um, it's always a great opportunity to bring the community together, particularly in a time of change like this, when the world is you can almost literally, figuratively, you feel everything shifting, and you're not really sure what it's going to be like in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. But to be able to position the future, and bring people together to talk about specifically what do we want to become the best in this region, best in the world at we can be. So one of the things we've seen here is, especially at our secondary level, middle school, high school, that having everybody now have like previously students didn't have devices, the one-to-one devices. So teachers were preparing lessons without that in mind. I mean, if they had a small group of Chromebooks or devices available in a classroom, they would plan unit activities around those. But now, all of a sudden, I'd say we made 4 or 5 years worth of progress on the technology front in about 6 months' time, because we were able to, thanks to our parents and the district kind of pooling to do a bring your own device initiative. Everybody now walks in to school or at home having their own device, and having that means that teachers can count on that and design activities and lessons and experiences with those. And that has then opened up doors for more differentiated instruction, meeting targeted student needs in terms of the choice of activity, the choice of medium. It just puts more options in people's hands, right? So that's a shift we didn't see coming that we now have, and we never want to go back. So planning for that future when we've just been able to accelerate a fair bit is really cool. I mean, so I'm excited about that, and I think we're going to be moving forward on this within the next 6 months to get this in place, and then it'll be all about mobilizing the team and motivating everybody around this shared purpose and building a little bit more coherence within the system, all moving in one direction. So it'll be with all the potential and all the great personnel we have here and the great resources we have here, the sky really is going to be the limit in terms of what we can do if we can just get into that process and see where it takes us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, and you're sort of hinting at one of my favorite topics, which is culture. That you've got
Mm-hmm.
this tremendous opportunity that the pandemic is availed to you, where you've accelerated this technology
Mhm.
adoption, if you will, and opportunity at unbelievable rates, like a lot of schools. And now you've got this ripe chance to really, how do I build this into the organization? How do I build this
Yeah.
into the culture? And so I'd love to hear from you. How do you think about culture as a leader?
Yeah, culture. Hence the name of your podcast, right? Culture does, eat everything. And I think it was Peter Drucker, right, who maybe coined that phrase. And
Well, he said culture eats strategy for breakfast.
strategy for breakfast,
We
right?
think he's a brilliant guy with a great tagline, but we actually think that culture is much stronger than breakfast. It eats everything.
It eats everything.
So we coined that one.
It's good. Well, you gotta keep that one. Hang on to it because it's true. I think it really is. And
Yeah.
you know, um, I've been part of a lot of organizations that have had great strategies and great accountability structures, but it just seems like the organizations or the ones that I've enjoyed being the part of who have accomplished the most have had great culture, great teams that really synergized, with one another. And I think that's the difference maker right there. So, when you have both going on, when you have strategy and culture, I think it's, the best. That's kind of the platinum plan there. But having one without the other, particularly not having strategy without the right culture around it, obviously you're missing opportunities there, right? So, thinking about our situation here, it's interesting because there was a time, I think about 15 years ago, that I hear about, and it's interesting. Like I hear people talk. We went through a process of examining the tech. We had a third party examination of the current state of technology, and there was this time when these interactive whiteboards came in the classrooms,
Yeah.
and this district was out in front on that. It was a leader in that. They were the first to have them, the first to put them in, and they had teacher leaders really going through and making sure that they were being used and applied. And there was this, you can still hear it in people's voices today. Like they talk about those were the days when we were at our best.
Mm.
Those were the days when people were chasing us because we were doing some cool things and we were really excited about what we were doing. And I think we're about that far away from those times again. People are sitting there. Culture here is saying, come on, let's do some more of that. Let's, not to say that it hasn't been going on here. It really has been, but to really, have universally everybody galvanized around an idea or a mission or a piece of that mission that they're real excited about is a big deal. So that's kind of what I think of when I think of culture. And also the ability to almost communicate, symbiotically, where people really understand each other and they understand, like, there aren't so many silos, and people in each division, and each division leader kind of knows, he knows the other well and knows how to meet the needs of the other well, and they move, in very candid conversations when need be, or even nuanced, almost thought exchange, through the airwaves kind of conversations. There's an anticipation and intuition. When you have an organizational culture like that, focused on things that I think are great values around maybe, servant leadership and focused on those kind of things, I think it's unbeatable, and people want to come and work for you and they don't want to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And recruitment becomes a lot easier, right? So that's what I think of when I think of culture, and I'm excited because I think it exists here already, and I think what's needed is a little bit more strategy focus around it, and a little more so that there's something to attach to, so that culture can be applied in a particular direction.
Yeah. 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 You're speaking to a future,
Mm-hmm.
which is, there's always upside. As long as you're in an organization made up of human beings, there's always upside. It doesn't do anything to diminish the past or diminish the present. That we're doing really well. We're doing great. We're doing fantastic, and we could always improve. Is what I hear you saying. That there's always
Absolutely.
more.
There's always more. Yeah. Yeah. Another thing I've kind of learned in more recent years and want to cultivate more into organization, any organization I'm part of right now, this one is wanting constructive feedback and not being threatened by
Mm.
feedback that is a little bit difficult to hear, on the human side, right? So, over the years in education, like through the No Child Left Behind years, it was all about top to bottom lists and rankings and sortings and standardized tests, and all with the right intentions, right? To make sure that there were not these big equity gaps, that certain students were not being left behind, and we were counting for everybody and saying, how do we get everybody up to a high level? So the intention was right, but the methodology was sort of a total quality management, I guess, for lack of a better term, approach to, sort of uh, uh, a quality improvement sort of model applied to education. And when it was misapplied at times, it could become a demotivator because it became a threat. It became about punishing instead of learning. And so, for the longest time, I had a disdain for that in the culture, right? It's like, I want no part of that. I want to just unlock potential. But I learned the hard way over the years that there's to not embrace that that culture that gives you quick, timely feedback, even if the threat were removed, right? Mm-hmm. If it were in a constructive environment or culture, the power there is tremendous. And so I kind of had to have a growth period where I realized, okay, so let's remove the punitive piece and the threat, and let's sit in that problem space, and let's create structures to be able to do that and be okay with that. Because it just shows us where we need to go. And now we can start working on how to get there faster. Mm-hmm. So that's been a big growth for me in the last 5 years or so. I've really had to eat some humble pie and, realize, okay, so I had some stuff wrong there that I had to adjust. But I understand why I didn't like it. I didn't like it for the right reasons. Yeah. But I'm appreciative of being in a place where I can embrace that feedback. So data, the use of data is real important.
Well, it's we could talk about NCLB, No Child Left Behind, for hours probably, but we won't do that today. But it's a wonderful model for, as you started with feedback, this, what I would call coaching, the ability to, that coaching really happens in the listening, that when we can open up our ears enough and set aside our immediate reaction, our immediate opinion, and just listen, and say, what's the value in this? I may not agree with it, but what's the value in this? And that's what I heard you say, is that I didn't love this data stuff. I didn't love this punitive approach, but it's not that it's all bad. What's the value in the data that we can actually use to improve ourselves as a organization, as a school system, and better serve the kids that we're tasked to serve, which is wonderful, wonderful model.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're going to just, suspend judgment long enough to take it in, right? That's a real gift if you can learn to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not always easy with your emotions kind of right there. When people work so hard, right? They work so hard to do something, and put their heart and soul into it, and then to have someone come along or some information come along, and it can get a little raw, but it is great when you can just suspend that judgment long enough to take it in.
Yes.
I have always admired people who can do that easily, quickly. There are people that I know who've learned how to do that very readily. Like, just bring it on, just tell me. I just want to know. I can take it, and they do, and they just don't get ruffled. Yeah. They don't have to even work out. They don't seem to even have to work up to it. They just want the information.
Yeah.
It's pretty admirable quality.
They're able to just accept it as it is, and then say, okay, now what? Where to from here?
What's next? Okay.
I can spend all day complaining about it. It's like the burner analogy. When your finger's on a hot burner, your finger moves pretty quick, right? Same thing is true with emotional information. Too often we sit and we keep our hand on the burner, as opposed to saying, okay, I didn't like that reaction. What am I going to do about it now? And that's the shift that's hard for a lot of us, and like you said before, it can be day to day. It can be hour to hour sometimes, where we feel like masters, of our universe, masters of those responding versus reacting. And then an hour later, we're all reaction. We're all emotions. We're we're right back to being human.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes I
So,
think wonder. Go ahead.
no, go ahead. I'm
I
gonna.
was just going to say sometimes it depends on what you ate or whether you ate, right? Your blood sugar levels at the moment, how fast you respond. Things that throughout the day, it's amazing.
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
just reading a thing by Daniel Pink just right before we got on, about timing is everything. I guess he's got a new book out or something, really talking about these patterns in the day and when certain tasks, are best to be done in the day, and that we have sort of predictable circadian patterns through our day,
mm.
and being cognizant of that, but yeah,
And there's an example of where data is helpful, right? To actually
right,
be able to unpack that. That
yeah,
data can be
yeah,
hugely helpful, but there is an aversion to it, I think, by and large, by most folks, especially in the education space, because of lots of reasons. But No Child Left Behind certainly didn't help with that because it was a lot of punitive stuff. Um, so our time is flying by as it always does. I'm just curious, two questions. One is, what book or books might you recommend to fellow listeners out there?
there's one that I read some time ago that I really enjoy. It's The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle. I find that his the way that he lays out principles of leadership and the need for a sense of belonging, and the importance of that sense of belonging uh, in terms of setting a culture is huge. And it was really useful for me. He gives some really great examples. He talks about, in the book, um, about how in these design challenges, that these kindergartners were able to outperform, MIT, grad students, because they didn't care about appearances and they just had direct communication and they just tried stuff. And if it didn't work, they pulled, going back to your analogy of pulling your finger off the hot stove, right? Okay, that didn't work. What's next? And their communication patterns were so uninhibited and so direct that they were able to get things, done in ways that the more cerebral folks couldn't. And I think things like that have just really been instructive. But it also talks about coaches like Greg Popovich, who one of the greatest coaches in the NBA, and how his style works, how he has really high standards, and yet he creates a sense of family, so that he can tell you anything, but in the end, you belong. You're part of that group, you're part of that family, and so really, he hits home on this pattern of how we communicate in these ways about belonging, and that is foundational to trust, which is foundational to opening yourself up to improvement. And so I've really enjoyed that book. I think he does a really great job in simple, plain, direct language, laying out these principles that every leader can appreciate.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. It's the best, one of the best culture books out there. Until we write ours, Culture Eats Everything. Someday, coming to
I want an
bookshelf
autograph.
near you.
I want an autographed copy. I'll be first in line.
You got it. You got it. My last question is just, for kind of aspiring leaders out there, for maybe younger folks that are thinking about their leadership journey. Maybe they've got that glimmer of an idea of being a CEO or a superintendent someday. What advice would you give them?
Do it. I mean, number one, don't think you can't do it. If you have a vision to lead, and particularly to lead, any kind of an organization at the CEO level, or the some level approaching, that I think uh, I can speak for myself. That if you have that aspiration and that belief, there's a reason. And you should not dismiss it, or ever think that you can't do it, or you might ask yourself, should I do it? I think that's a fair question. What is this going to involve? What might it cost me? What might yield for me in life? But if you're yearning for it and desiring it, don't ever let doubt creep in to say, well, that's for someone else. I'm like, it's not for me. I some people come to these roles through the most unconventional of means. Here I am, a school superintendent, and my GPA was, I was not a 4.0 GPA kind of person, right? In high school, I didn't particularly much care about school, right? I was more interested in other things. That's precisely one of the reasons why I'm focused on creating a better system that meets the needs of more people than the system I grew up in, had met. So, I would say pursue it courageously. Don't ever think that you can't do it. Ask yourself, why do I want to do it? And try to find that why and get with people who will help you figure out how you get there. And try to find some mentors, people you admire, and try to, seek input from them and, get close enough to them to let them give you some thoughts and advice and some coaching along the way, because soon enough, you'll be in that spot, and hopefully without any reservation or doubt, but with a sense of conviction and confidence. Back to the first point you started with.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I loved your sort of initial answer there, which was just do it. I think that's so simple and so profound, because if you've got that yearning, even if it's just this distant whisper, there's something there. And don't let all those negative self-talk thoughts get in your way. Just
absolutely
go make it happen.
Absolutely, make it happen. Yeah, it's there for a reason. That yearning is there for a reason. You can't always tell why, but I know we've all had experiences. I'm sure you have. I know I have, where you have an inkling like, this is my purpose. Let's go get it. Let's go do it. And you move in that direction as confidently as you can, and most of the time those doors open. And sometimes where those initial thoughts came from, you don't know. But if that continues to be a desire, it's got to be done.
Yeah. It's not a maybe. It's a must be done.
It must be done.
Go make it happen. That's your contribution to the world.
Exactly. So finding that purpose, and sometimes you don't know all the whys and the wherefores. You just have a sense that this is part of the destination, part of the journey, part of this, your life's journey. And things certainly do reveal themselves as you're on the way. They don't always unfold in a perfect plan, right? Sometimes it's just one phase after another. So it's important to be about it and on it.
Mm-hmm. Just keep going, keep grinding.
Keep going. Yeah.
Well, absolutely. Awesome, Rob. I appreciate it. I always appreciate our conversations. I love the chats. I love the ideas and the topics, and your willingness to just be real about all this stuff. So thank you for your time.
Oh, thanks, Tom. It's an honor to be asked to be part of your podcast today. And I've always enjoyed our talks as well, and I appreciate them very much.
All right, sir. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks.